listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the college football Week 5 preview for Thursday, September 26th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, folks, we love when Bruce Marshall can join us. Brian Blessing, we're talking college football season rolling right along. No time to waste with so many opportunities on the wagering board. Bruce, in fact, first of all, hello, bud. How you doing?
Hey, pretty good. Good week coming up here.
Yeah, it is. In some quality games. The funny thing is, how about Friday night? There are 4 games on Friday, and we're into conference play. Duke at Virginia Tech, Penn State at Maryland, San Jose State at Air Force, Arizona State at Cal. That's a pretty nice menu of games. And of the fourth, the one I'd sit there and say, maybe from the betting perspective, San Jose State, I mean, the letdown to the moon, having to face an offense that's tough to prepare for. It's probably the least attractive game, but laying 19 with Air Force may be the best bet of all of them that are up there.
Yeah, this is interesting. Now, they've got the schedule, and they played Army last year. They didn't play Air Force last year. They've got Army coming up again in a couple weeks. So San Jose State's seen versions of this, although, Army's runs a little bit different than Air Force. But what you got to do is check San Jose's schedule. Now, this one it doesn't seem too bad where they're playing, but, I mean, they are on a barnstorming tour. They've got playing in 5 time zones this season, so it's going to catch up to them eventually. But they are off a big win, and they don't look all that bad. And when's the last time San Jose State had a winning record into late September? So a little more interesting than usual in this one.
What about Penn State and Maryland, though? I think Maryland. Everybody got this great. Oh, look at Maryland! And then Maryland lost to Temple. It's like okay, reality check. Penn State laying 6.5. Yeah,
and we were ready to drink the Kool-Aid on Maryland, but pumped the brakes just one more week, and then got us off the scent. The Temple game. I mean they look so good. The first 2 weeks with Josh Jackson, the transfer from Virginia Tech at quarterback, and everybody thought, now Mike Loxley's learned how to coach, that he'd been around Nick Saban for a couple of years. He had been here briefly at Maryland as an interim after the year they fired Randy Edsall a few years ago, but his job at New Mexico before that was one of the worst I ever saw. It seemed like he learned what he was doing. But the Temple game raises the questions again. Here's the question here, though, is Penn State has beaten this team like a drum. The last few 2 years, I think it's 104-6 total score the last 2 years. Has Maryland closed the gap that much, and has Penn State slipped some? I think we'll get a better answer Friday night.
The odd thing about this game, there's actually a common denominator in here, and I get every game's a snowflake, and teams week to week could be worn out. But here's the funny thing. Buffalo hung with Penn State, had the lead on them at halftime, and then Penn State's depth beat them to a pulp. And then Buffalo, beats Temple, murders Temple, and Temple's the team that beat Maryland. Can you draw parallels with that one common denominator that both Maryland's played a team that played Buffalo and Penn State played Buffalo? Can you find a way to put that web together because of the common denominator?
Maybe, but I think the denominator is Buffalo's probably pretty good, and Temple caught them at the wrong time, and Penn State woke up in time in the second half. Hard to say, but I thought the Penn State Buffalo score was extremely misleading a couple of weeks ago. So not sure if we can draw a parallel between Maryland and Penn State, other than Buffalo's probably pretty good.
All right, good enough. Hey, let me throw one at you. BYU. At Toledo, and it's one of the bigger movers, 4.5. It's down to 2.5. BYU favorite on the road. They have faced a gauntlet, Bruce, and that builds a foundation. But there also comes a stretch of the season where maybe you get a bit on the tired side, and this Toledo football team can score and they can run the football. I think the dog is live, but I would say this: if BYU is tired, I think this game has track meet written all over it.
Yeah, I could see that too. I could see a lot of scoring in this one. We're talking, right around 60 or so, 60.5, the last total that we saw here. Toledo did. They ran the ball with vengeance last week at Colorado State, though they had some trouble slowing down CSU in that game. So it would suggest this could be a shootout too. But you're right. I think the key here is what's BYU got left in the tank. I mean, this was a very challenging first month for the Cougars and a lot of high-profile games, and they look like they were out of gas last week against Washington. Now they're going to have to rev it back up again here. Kalani Sitake, the head coach, is not out of the woods yet just because, he won that game at Tennessee and beat USC. He needs to keep on winning, and this is not easy. And Godogny, the quarterback, is not throwing a pick yet this season for Toledo. They're running the ball a lot and scoring a lot of points. So we actually had a 34-31 Rockets in the Gold Sheet.
How about Minnesota at Purdue? And Purdue upset by Nevada in the opener, then beat Vandy handily and lost to TCU. And anytime, nothing ever surprises you. You play TCU because Patterson's such a good coach. I just wonder if this is a mad Purdue team and Minnesota could be walking into a buzzsaw here.
Well, it's possible here, and let's see if Elijah Sindelar, Purdue's quarterback, gets back in the lineup here this week. He had a concussion, missed that game against TCU a couple weeks ago. The freshman Plummer had problems. They've got to get the ball to Rondale Moore, the wide receiver. I don't know that Sindelar was even doing that enough the first couple of games. But I think much depends here upon Sindelar, and we haven't gotten the word yet if he's going to go or not. So that obviously makes a difference. Normally, I would take Braum over PJ Fleck, even though and this year there's a revenge thing because Minnesota got him last year pretty good. Purdue had its flat spot of the year, and Minnesota got all fired up and won pretty big in Minneapolis. So there's a revenge thing here, but I need to see if Sindelar is going to play or not. No word yet on that. And that obviously is very important for the Boilermakers.
Washington State and Utah is a really intriguing game. Utah, 5.5, 6-point favorites. Total on the game, let's call the consensus 56.5. Something's got to give here. Offense versus defense. But what do you do with Washington State with one of the monumental collapses you will ever see? It's a team that can score, but my Lord, did they unravel against UCLA? And the question is, how will they react to that this week?
Well, they had to keep sharp objects away from the Cougars this week, I think. I still can't figure out what went on in that game. It was just ridiculous. And a couple times, not to that degree last week, but I've seen Leach's teams blow leads like that on occasion when they just stop playing defense and try to run out the clock. You can't do that on defense. You can do that, try to slow the pace offense, but when you just play soft on defense, you end up the other team scores within 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden you got a game. But I think Utah, there were some fundamental flaws exposed last week by USC. One, Utah's secondary is rather small. SC put up a lot of rainbow passes that their receivers outfought the Utah defensive backs for. One, because they're small. Two, because they weren't covering all that good. Two, Utah's defensive line, they are big and tough, but they got a little bit tired as that game went on against USC. And that the heavy legs late in the game, that was sort of an issue. And three, the quarterback Huntley, who's hurting a bit. Now he's going to supposedly play here, but he was really bothered last week. And that was surprising because SC wasn't really able to stop the run too well. But when Huntley went back to pass, and SC was pretty much just rushing the front four, they were collapsing the pocket, and Huntley looked almost every passing play looked skittish. I think Utah, there's a reason these guys lost 5 games last year, and they've lost the last 2 to Leach. And I think Leach goes in there and wins, and you're getting a bonus plus the points here, and you can get on the money line. I was looking at plus 180, nearly plus $2 with Washington State. This is a toss-up game that Washington State has won the last 2 years, and they can beat Utah again, 31-27 Leach on Saturday.
It's in the middle of the pack on the board. It's actually the get-out game, but I wanted to ask you before. I want to make sure I didn't let this one fall through the cracks. Hawaii at Nevada. Nevada, 2.5-point favorites. Total on the game is 65. Hawaii's only loss comes at the hands of Washington. Nevada with that upset win we alluded to. Then they got drilled by Oregon. But the one thing you always have to take into account, and albeit I believe this is their first one, so maybe it's not that bad. It becomes an issue later in the year, but it's Hawaii coming to the mainland, and that is always the concern, right?
Yeah, it is. In fact, they came a couple weeks ago and got blitzed at Washington. They got blown out there. So that drops them to 4-9, their last 13 on the mainland. Here for Nick Rolovich, that's against the line. And they've had even more trouble here in Reno. They failed to cover their last 3, and they failed to win straight up their last 5 here at Mackey Stadium. So Reno's been particularly tough. Maybe it's the lights of Virginia Street or sitting 4,500 feet up right at the foot of the Sierras. I don't know. But they don't seem to play too well in Reno. I think I'm more interested here in what's going on with the Wolfpack. They've got 2 quarterbacks now they can use. Jay Norvell went back to Christian Solano, the senior, who was expected maybe to start at the beginning of the season, had a hand injury in fall camp. And they went with the freshman Carson Strong, who got that win over Purdue. And then they also have that a win over Weber State, which is a pretty good Big Sky team, all around that Oregon loss. But last week, Solano at UTEP passed for 2 TDs, ran for 100 yards. So Jay Norvell can go with 2 different guys there, and Hawaii just does not play well up here in particular. This is a late one on ESPN2. We had it 35-26 Wolfpack. Oh, so I think they can. I think we're going to go with them. I think Norvell's done a really nice job in that Hawaii thing in the mainland. Like you say, got to consider that.
Virginia is at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is laying 12.5. Total on the game is 48.5. Listen, Bronco Mendenhall can coach, and specifically you pay attention to these guys on the defensive side of the ball. And I wonder, Bruce, everybody saw Notre Dame in Georgia, and Notre Dame covered, and Notre Dame was there at the end with a chance. And I wonder if it's not, I want to be fair, but I think it's a phony result. I think their defense obviously played very good. But if you watch that game, Notre Dame, they couldn't get a first down. And they punt, and the Georgia kid muffs the ball at the 5-yard line, hands them a 1st and goal. And I think with penalties, it might have taken them 8 plays to get in and scored on 4th down. They were life and death to get the touchdown that Georgia basically handed them. Their defense played really good, but then I think Georgia started playing the clock at the end of the game, and all that does is let a team back in it. And I just wonder if it's not a phony result.
It might be, and I have a feeling Georgia's a tad overrated here. We'll see as the season plays out, but they started playing tight, which I've seen from Kirby Smart's teams before. That's why we kind of like Notre Dame plus last week. But Notre Dame nonetheless emptied its chambers last week at Athens, and now you're home, and the schedule works. This week it works well for Virginia. Last week it didn't. That was a sandwich spot after the big Florida State comeback in Notre Dame, and they were flat for Old Dominion. We thought they might be, and they ended up trailing at halftime, and they roared back in the second half, and they got serious. Don't forget, these guys went into Pitt opening week and took care of business against the Panthers, and you saw how much trouble Penn State had, and UCF couldn't even win at Heinz Field. So Virginia's got something going. I think, and as much as I like Ian Book, I like Bryce Perkins a little bit more the other way, Virginia's quarterback. And you mentioned Bronco Mendenhall. He's a Rocky Long disciple. They run a lot of the same stuff defensively, a lot of the same stunts and blitzes. It is a very awkward defense to face if you haven't faced it before. And I think this is going to be a problem for Notre Dame. I wouldn't be surprised if Virginia wins this game. We had it 28-27 Irish in the gold sheet. We actually made Virginia a key release plus the points. But, I mean, this one is live, and you're getting nearly plus 400 on the money line here with Virginia. I would take, for a flyer this week, that is not a bad value for a money line price with a team like this.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm kind of on board with that. And that's the one thing in that last game. It was a physical game, too. And we've just seen that in the NFL, Bruce, where Philadelphia got beat up by Atlanta and then went home and lost the game to Detroit. So when you play in those really physical games, boy, does it take a toll the next week.
Yeah, it does, and especially emotionally too. I mean, Notre Dame was really keen on that game all the offseason, and everything was aimed toward Georgia there, and that was the key to getting Notre Dame back in the contention for a Final Four spot. That is a very hard road now for Notre Dame. It would have been a lot easier if they would have beaten Georgia. So they had everything was into the ambush at Athens, and almost worked, but coming back against a good team the next week, that's not the best situation.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. All right, let's go Big Ten, and that's Ohio State laying 17 at Nebraska. Crazy thing is 70% of the tickets are on Ohio State, but I think the sharp money's on Nebraska.
Yeah, and we'll see about Ohio State here. I mean, this guy, Ryan Day, is obviously running up scores here whenever he can. He is looking to make sure nobody thinks that Ohio State's had a drop-off after Urban. I mean, Day was the interim head coach of the first 3 games of last year, and so far so good. Justin Fields looks really good. This offense is white-hot. The defensive end, Young, is already, I mean, this guy is unbelievable. He's better than the Bosa's, I think, already 7 sacks this season, and he came into the year doing pretty well. But the schedule hasn't been that tough. Here's the thing, though. How good is Nebraska? I mean, I think Nebraska is better than Indiana, the best team Ohio State beat. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I think Nebraska is, and they do get Ohio State at home. That game last week against Illinois, if they're as mistake-prone as they were against the Illini, and Nebraska gained almost 700 yards in that game, but because of 5 giveaways, almost lost. They do that sloppiness against Ohio State, they're going to get boat raced here at home. And Martinez, the quarterback, though, is a playmaker, so I think they'll stay in this thing for a while. But Ohio State, at this stage, I'm just not, interested in getting in front of that freight train if I don't have to. 41-21 Buckeyes in the gold sheet, and it's mostly because we're just not sure how good Nebraska is yet. And like I said, I'm not sure they're that much better than Indiana, which was Ohio State's toughest victim thus far. We'll see what happens in Lincoln.
All right, you got the answer on this one. You're my hero. Georgia Tech and Temple. Temple's laying 9, totals 48.5. Temple gets the big win against Maryland. They get punched in the mouth against Buffalo. And here's Georgia Tech after all those years running that wishbone kind of offense, trying to finally change things up. Murdered by Clemson in the opener, barely beat South Florida in a low-scoring game, and then lose to Citadel. My goodness, what do we do with these two teams?
Yeah, Citadel got physical with them, and they beat them. Well, the deal here is this is the Jeff Collins game. I mean, he had been at Temple the last couple of years, and he left and for Georgia Tech, which was an understandable move. He's from Georgia, so that made sense. Temple, disparate efforts. That was not a good effort against Buffalo after a very good effort against Maryland. I would think Temple has a good chance to bounce back here. The new offense that Collins has put in at Georgia Tech isn't working yet. They rank 123rd in scoring, 127th in total offense. He's trying to put a pro-style attack in there with a roster that was largely recruited to run the option for Paul Johnson. He's taking guys who had been recruited as running backs. There's not as much room for running backs in this new offense, so he's tried to make them receivers and things like that. And he's got another problem on defense. They're allowing 5.5 yards per carry, so that's not too good. And Russo, Temple's quarterback, is usually pretty steady. He threw 3 picks against Buffalo. That's uncharacteristic for him. I think he'll come back and play better. I just don't want to take Georgia Tech right now, so we won't. 31-14.
Is this flying under the radar a little bit? Indiana's at Michigan State, and Michigan State's laying 14. Totals only 44. We know how good that defense is. You had the stupidity with too many men on the field on a field goal that would have tied the game. They end up losing to Arizona State. But this is that time of year. I've been talking about this, Bruce. When you love college football, it's not a season. It's like 5 seasons. You have the great unknown, what these teams are out of the gate. Then you have the David and Goliath games early in the season. Then you start getting into conference play. Then you get the look-aheads and the sandwich games and the letdown spots. And at the end of the year, you get the teams that are motivated circling the wagons to become bowl eligible. Well, here's one of these games. Michigan State's got Ohio State in the on-deck circle. And I don't care who we are. It's human nature. They got to mind their business here. And, who's the better team? I don't think there's any doubt. But that look-ahead thing, does it make Indiana attractive?
Well, it might. And the problem with Michigan State is now you're laying a lot of points. They did extend the margin on Northwestern last week. But I still need a little bit more evidence about this offense because, like you said, they only got 7 the week before against Arizona State, and that was a recurring problem throughout last season. They just didn't score enough. That defense was great a year ago, and that's one reason D'Antonio has not performed well as double-digit home chalk lately. They're just 1-7. Their last 8 is double-digit home chalk here at East Lansing. Conversely, Indiana is 7-2. Its last 9 is a double-digit road dog. So Indiana has generally had enough weaponry to stick around some of these double-digit numbers. I think that might be the case again. Ramsey, the quarterback, looks like he reclaimed his job after the injury to the redshirt freshman Penix, and he's been looking pretty good the last couple games. They got to get Stevie Scott going running the ball, but I don't know that I trust Michigan State's offense. I know the defense is good, but do we want to trust these guys laying this many points with D'Antonio's record like that and Ohio State on deck? I don't think so. 24-15, Michigan State, they win it. I'm not sure they're going to cover it. I'd rather take Indiana if I had to do something with this game.
All right. And this is more a question. We've got the game to consider, but it's also a question about the conference. Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's laying 4. Total on the game is 61. Kansas State coming in here, a ranked team. Is it about that time? Is this just another year in the Big 12 where they cannibalize one another?
It might be. I don't, especially with Kansas not looking like a soft touch this year. I'm not sure where the soft touch is. Texas Tech might be the worst team in this league this year. They got a quarterback injury too to worry about. It's neither of these teams. In fact, these teams are both formidable, and Kansas State is kind of a surprise here. Now, Chris Kleiman was hired away from North Dakota State. He had a record there that looked like a football version of Gino Auriemma at UConn. He was 69-6. Now, he took over for Craig Bowl after they had won some national titles there at the FCS level, and he inherited Carson Wentz as his quarterback. But guess what? They kept winning national titles after Wentz graduated to the NFL. Kleiman knows what he's doing. He was running an offense very similar to Bowles' run-heavy offense at North Dakota State. And it's not that dissimilar to what Bill Snyder had been running here for ages. But they have tweaked it a little bit, and they're a little more aggressive. They're going up top. They're throwing on running downs and things like that. Skylar Thompson, the quarterback, can do some things. And he hasn't thrown a pick, by the way, in the first 3 games. And, oh, yes, by the way, they do have come into this game with a week off after having won at Mississippi State. Very impressive. And Oklahoma State went to the wire with Texas last week. Really, spent itself, its emotional reservoir last week. And, oh, by the way, Kansas State has been winning in this series as an underdog lately. Now, the one guy who might be happy Snyder left is Mike Gundy, who has been losing to Kansas State, like I said, and has also dropped 7 of the last 8 in this series, point spread-wise, to K-State. But I think Kleiman is turning out to be a home run hire. We know this guy is a winner, and Kansas State is responding. If they can go into Starkville and win, they can go into Stillwater and win, I think. 33-29, we're going to call the upset here for K-State. I think this is a team to watch and really flying under the radar, but not so much anymore. They cranked the rankings this week, and keep an eye on these guys.
All right, we'll wrap it up with an SEC game, Bruce. Mississippi State is at Auburn. Auburn, number 7 in the country, laying 10.5. Total on the game is 47. At the moment, kind of a favorable stretch of the schedule for Auburn. We remember them opening week with that electrifying last-second win against Oregon State. Is there a banana peel here?
I think this might be a banana peel. And because Mississippi State, even though it had to go to the other quarterback, Schrader, here with Tommy Stevens starting, and Stevens might be available for this game, but Schrader looks like he can run this RPO that Moorhead likes and can keep this thing kind of interesting. They have been able to, they beat Auburn last year in Starkville, And Auburn has had a very challenging stretch here. I mean, they've won a couple of very big games against ranked teams away from Jordan-Hare. So, I mean, they're feeling really good, but I have a feeling this is a little bit of a banana peel because Mississippi State's catching them just right. And there's some big games coming up for Auburn right on the horizon here, and Mississippi State's not all that bad. So 24-20 Auburn, I think the Tigers win. I don't think they can cover this game, though. Although they have a warning, Gus Malzahn is 4-0 against the number. I'm just not sure he gets there this week.
He is our fountain of information when it comes to college football, our dear friend Bruce Marshall from the legendary publication The Gold Sheet. Bruce, enjoy the week in college football. We'll do it again soon.
Okay, Brian, thank you.
All right, we'll be back with you as the college football season rolls right along.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com. And reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling, an approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.